Orthopedic surgeons over the last 20 years have actually lost 40% of their income. This is a conversation between two generations of physicians, and one I wish every younger doctor could sit in on.
You can't go crazy when you start making all this money. I saw many physicians a little bit older than me, and I think their mindset was, oh, I'm just going to spend all my money now because I know I'm going to make it up later. And then before you know it, later, they're not making it up. And so next thing you know, they're working until they're 70, 75, and then they're grumpy old doctors because they hate what they're doing, but they're doing it because they have to.
Welcome to the Doctors Investor Club podcast, where physicians and dentists come together to elevate their mindset, build their assets, and create a lasting legacy. I'm your host, Dr. Kyle Stephenson. After years in the OR, I've realized wealth is not just about high income. It's about ownership, freedom, and using your money with purpose. Here at the Doctors Investor Club, we share the strategies the wealthy already know: owning a business, real estate investing, becoming your own banker, and intentional investing. Each week, we sit down with entrepreneurs, investors, and physicians who've stepped off the hamster wheel and are building wealth that outlives them. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep and the impact you leave behind. Let's get into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to the Doctors Investor Club podcast. This is your host, Kyle Stephenson. Today's episode is different. This episode is a prequel to the book I'm writing with our guest called Legacy RX: Build Wealth, Live Free, Leave What Lasts. The book began with questions medicine rarely allows us to slow down long enough to answer. What are we building? What is success costing us? What is money actually for? And when the surgeries, titles, and paychecks are gone, what will remain? No one has shaped the way I think about those questions more than today's guest. Before Dr. John Flood became my father-in-law, he was one of the orthopedic surgeons who trained me. Over time, he became a mentor, a sounding board, and one of the most important voices in this book. Dr. Flood has lived the full arc of medicine. He built a career, raised a family, walked through success and sacrifice, retired from orthopedic surgery, and now has the perspective to look back and see what mattered, what cost more than expected, and what actually lasts. He wrote the foreword to Legacy RX book, and throughout the book, readers will hear his reflections from the other side of a full surgical career. So this is more than an interview. This is a conversation between two generations of physicians, and one I wish every younger doctor could sit in on. Dr. Flood, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Kyle. Thanks for the kind words. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, we appreciate you. There will be more, I'm sure. Let's just start off with your career. What got you into medicine? What got you into orthopedics? Take us back to the beginning, if you don't mind, just so listeners can get a feel for who you are.
Sure. Well, I think what got me interested in medicine to begin with was several things. One, my mom was a nurse, worked in the emergency room. She actually worked at NASA, the space people, for a while. Then she became an industrial nurse working for Ford Motor. I had an uncle that was a chiropractor, and I had an uncle that was a general surgeon. So I was surrounded by a lot of people in the medical field. I always liked sort of the sciences, biology, anatomy, physiology. I always enjoyed those things. So I think that's at least what got me interested. Now, strangely enough, when I was in college, I thought at one point that I may want to be a biomedical engineer, because I'm thinking there's a lot of really neat things that they use in medicine. And wouldn't it be really kind of cool to design and build those things? But there was really only one problem. There's a lot of math, and I hate math. I don't like math. So very quickly, I figured out that wasn't going to work. And I went back to my original plan of going to medical school.
Yep. That's great.
As far as the orthopedic piece goes, I always like sort of tinkering on things, working on motorcycles, lawnmowers, you name it. When I first got into the hospital situation, I thought, well, maybe, I would want to do general surgery like my uncle. Mm-hmm. But, taking out gallbladders and appendix operations just didn't do much for me. And I did an orthopedic rotation. And, I got to tell you, I mean, they had cool instruments. The people were great to work with. They were just fun. They weren't high strung. They were kind of low key. And I think, I like that. Sometimes you do a specialty, and even maybe the people that you come into contact with in that specialty might turn you off to it just by the way they carry themselves, their demeanor. And the orthopedic piece for me was just, oh, these guys are great. I could do this for the rest of my life. And that's sort of how I got into it.
Yeah. There's stereotypes to all different specialties, right? And
Yeah,
so,
I think there can be.
yeah. And so orthopedics, so you didn't really know until medical school that you were going into orthopedics.
Yeah, I really didn't know probably until my, frankly, fourth year. I mean, I had inklings in my third year of med school when you're in the hospital setting. Certainly by my fourth year, I knew that was what I wanted to do. And I was pretty much all in ortho. My goal when I was on the orthopedic service as a fourth year medical student was to look better than the intern who was on the orthopedic service. That was my goal, not to, put that guy down, but to just work harder than he was, even though he had a year on me, because I wanted that spot.
Yep. That's awesome. And so when did you decide to go into spine fellowship?
Well, what happened was, as part of my residency, I did quite a bit of spine surgery. And, it's interesting because a lot of places, the neurosurgeons do spine, but there certainly are orthopedic spine surgeons. And we had a neurosurgeon at our hospital and a couple guys that did spine orthopedically. And I just really enjoyed it. And I felt, gee, it'd be kind of a shame to not continue to do this when I've had so much exposure to it. So once I finished my residency, I was on a military scholarship called the Health Professions Scholarship Program, which back then, I mean, it was a great thing because I got a deferment for my residency, got to do my residency. Then I went into the military as an orthopedic surgeon, spent 2 years in Japan, 2 years in Charleston, South Carolina. And of course, while I was at those duty stations, I was getting all the spine work. Now, I wasn't, doing crazy scoliosis surgery. I was just doing bread and butter spine, discectomies, maybe an occasional fusion here and there. And so really the reason I wanted to do the spine fellowship was that I just didn't feel I had done enough of certain things while in the military because, for the most part, it's a younger population. So what wound up happening is the guy that I had done my spine surgery fellow with at Michigan State University was the same individual who actually helped get me interested in orthopedics early on. I mean, I wasn't completely sold on it yet, but when I was a med student down at Ohio University, second year, I took my vacation time and I stayed down there. I didn't go home. And I spent my time with this Dr. Larry Meinslwick, and he was an orthopedic guy, did spine, and I really enjoyed it. He wound up coming up to Michigan State, and he had done some scoliosis surgery. He had trained at Twin Cities, which is a huge scoliosis place, and I wanted to see some of that. So I really it was kind of like almost like a visiting fellowship because I spent time with him, spent time with a guy in Cleveland, a guy out in Albany, New York, even Columbia, Missouri. So I was able to spend time with different physicians that were all spine specialists and operate with them. And that really got that going.
That's great. So you practiced for 33 years, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And you just retired, 3 years ago now?
Yeah, 2022.
Okay. Almost 4 years ago now. That's right. Because it was April 2022. All right. So looking back, when you were young, what did success as a physician look like to you?
Well, early on, success was like, gee, I made it. I finished all this training. Thank goodness. And then, of course, you get to the hospital like, oh, the buck stops with me now. It doesn't stop with the attending anymore. An earth-shattering experience when you're it. I mean, you're the guy. You're in charge. And so early on, I think for me, success meant having good patient outcomes. You wanted your patients to do well. You wanted to help people. And then, that sort of evolves because unfortunately, no matter how good your patient selection is, which, for any young physician listening, when you're doing surgery, it's all about patient selection. That's really what determines how well people are going to do, because you could have two people with the same pathology and you might both think they both need surgery when one does and the other doesn't, even though the MRI scan of their back looks the same and shows a disc herniation or whatever. So then, success turned into, okay, well, now I've got kids. I want my kids, I want to train them up in the way they should be trained up, according to the Bible. And then, you've got a wife that you're trying to keep happy. And for me, I will say success wasn't about having stuff. It was really more about family, faith, being generous with what I had been given, being a good steward of the money that I was making. So it wasn't about me hoarding my money, but, giving it to good causes where it could be put to good use.
Yep. No, that's great. Yeah. And I would say this about you, just when I trained with you, and I know you now, obviously, as my father-in-law, but just from everything I known about your career and the way people respected you, you definitely had, you were Christian, and that exuded from you just through your patients and your staff. Obviously a good husband, good father. And what your daughter and my wife would say, and all the kids would say, is you didn't miss a whole lot, right? Like, you worked hard, but you didn't really miss a whole lot. And the thing I respect about you, and we should get into this, is you obviously were a busy orthopedic spine surgeon. You got up early in the morning to get your workouts in, and then you went to work and you were busy, but you made sure to, go to your kids' things, and you were very present with your family, right?
Yeah. And that's very important, because medicine, can eat up your time. And I don't want to sort of, digress into other questions you may have, but, when you're self-employed as a physician, like I was, I didn't work for anybody. Back then, everybody was in private practice for the most part, not especially orthopedic surgery. But, if you're not working, you're not making money. And the corollary to that is when you have, you're a specialist, so you get referrals from your doctors. Well, they don't want to hear, I can see that guy 3 months from now, because they want their patients taken care of. And frankly, in the spine world, when people have a ruptured disc, they're in pain. I mean, they don't want to wait 3 months. They want something done now. It doesn't have to be surgery, but they want to see somebody that's got some expertise that can at least get them going in the right direction. Not like somebody that's been dealing with an arthritic hip for the last 5 years. There's no hip emergency, if you know what I mean. So that's kind of a catch-22 that you get into. But then I determined that, realistically, you can't let those things control your life. You have to take control of your time. And so you're right. I did really make an effort to, whatever sporting event my kids had, and I had 5 kids, so I had a lot of sporting events to go to. Thank goodness I had a set of twins and they played a lot of the same sports, so that was easy. But I tried to go to every sporting event I could. Now, that didn't always happen because my son was playing hockey, the girls were playing volleyball, so maybe I would go hockey because that's what I liked, and my wife would watch volleyball or whatever. And then, of course, if we could attend both, we would. So you have to make that time. And interestingly, during COVID, when things really slowed down, I got to the point where I said, I'm only going to see this many people a day. I just said, that's going to be my number, because I wanted to spend more time with the patients. And if I, didn't need to spend as much time with one patient, I could spend it with somebody else. The problem therein is that, your work is money. So if you're not working as much, your overhead goes up. And so that was one of those things that ultimately led me to consider retirement. But I don't want to, get off on a tangent here.
That's fine. Yeah. I mean, we're going to just, keep this conversation going, and we'll just flow, and whatever questions come up, so be it. Right.
Sure.
I would say just thinking about, some attendings that I've worked with and, residency, fellowship, medical school, all the above. And even docs I know now, one thing I've learned with physicians, and I just interviewed a professional athlete in my last podcast, and same thing with athletes, is sometimes it becomes an identity. It starts off, medicine's a calling for physicians, but then it becomes almost your identity. And that could be a problem because then now you identify as an orthopedic surgeon, like you got to take care of everybody in town and you got to say yes to everything. Well, then who do you put on the back burner? You put on, your faith, your wife, your kids. And so I think that can become a slippery slope, right? And I noticed for you, at least from what I saw, you never let it, control you, if you will. But some docs do get in trouble with that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And, interestingly too, is when I first got into medicine, sort of the old guard, meaning the guys that were maybe 3/4 of the way through their careers, and I was just starting, that was almost their mindset. Medicine first, everything else second.
Mm-hmm.
And, they were very good at what they did. They made a lot of money. They had a lot of toys. Well, my problem was their kids didn't know who they were.
Yep.
And they didn't have any time to use their toys.
Yep.
So they're paying for a lot of stuff. It's like, well, kids, go have fun on the boat. I won't be there. You know what I mean?
Yep. Exactly.
And I think I know exactly what you're talking about, though. And then I think too, when you're spending all your time with money, what are wives like? Most wives want their husbands to be home with them. And I think that's very important. And I'm like watching TV or, on the phone with the hospital doing something else. It's like with them physically, mentally, emotionally, maybe helping cook dinner, helping with the kids, giving baths, changing diapers. It's a team effort, so I think you got to be part of the team. And I've seen you do that, which makes me proud because you are part of the team effort. And I think that just makes for a much better household. Everybody's happy. People aren't getting divorced. Kids aren't saying, who's dad? I don't know who dad is.
Yep.
And there's too much of that goes on.
100%. And I refer to this a lot, but this book, Die with Zero by Bill Perkins, is awesome. And one of the things he talks about is usually when dads especially have young kids, that's when you're earliest in your career, whatever that career is. And you tend to be the busiest in that career, trying to build your practice, build whatever you're doing. And so you sacrifice that time with the kiddos. Yeah. But then by the time you got it going, your kids are 14, 15, they're hanging out with their friends. You're like, okay, now I got time to hang out with my kids. Well, it's too late. You missed out on that time, right? So that's why it's so precious.
Yeah. And I think early on, and I think maybe the military, because of where I was, helped. When you're living in Okinawa, Japan, I mean, it's a beautiful place. You're right. East China Sea on one side, Pacific Ocean on the other side of the island. Okinawa is just a small island, chain Ryukyu Islands. And so almost every weekend, weather permitting, we were taking the kids to the beach. I mean, back then my workouts suffered a little bit because I had little kids. I didn't really have time to work out like I would like to. But still, I used to play a lot of softball. And the cool thing about there was in the evenings, like say 7, 8 o'clock, they had lighted fields. The whole sort of base would come out, Marines, Navy, Air Force, guys playing each other. And so it was kind of good. It was like a family atmosphere.
Yep.
When you get back to the States, like when I was in Charleston, it's more just like, being in the neighborhood. You may know your neighbors, you may not. But again, the good thing there was I got to spend time with the kids. We had a boat. We would take the kids boating every week. And so I think that was kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is like, if you're going to be there at home or with the kids, be with the kids.
Yeah.
Don't be mentally off somewhere else. Be engaged with the kids in your life.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And nowadays, it's so hard for people because cell phones already, even if you're not on call, even if you're not a physician, like cell phones get in the way. You could be doing something at all times with your cell phone, and that becomes a problem. Yeah, well, and then you add on being on call, right?
Thank goodness cell phones weren't around. I mean, they were at the start of my practice, but they were literally just that, a phone. Looked like one of those World War II walkie-talkies. And so, I didn't have that. I remember as a resident, making sure I had enough change in my pocket in case my beeper went off so I could go find a payphone to call the hospital. That's how things were back then,
That's great.
It
We need to go back to that, though. We really do.
It was a different time for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing is, like, now you're almost too available because the nurses can text you. Like, every single person knows your number, so they can text you.
Oh, so, absolutely. Yeah. You can't escape.
Yep.
Funny, my when I was in the office, I would like go hide in the bathroom sometimes. My nurse would always like, "You're hiding in there, aren't you?" She'd be knocking on the door. I'm like, "Yeah, leave me alone for 5 minutes.
Yeah, give me a break.
In a second."
Over your career, medicine definitely seems to have changed more recently, I would say, with my generation, but you probably saw changes as well your whole time going through the career. But how did it change from the time you started to the time you finished, would you say?
Well, that's interesting. A couple things. Well, my first sort of experience to say managed care, if you will, I remember I was in practice in Ohio when I first got out of the military, and I saw a gal, she had a wrist fracture. I wanted to get her a wrist splint. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to send you down the street here to get your wrist splint. And her insurance like made her go to some place 45 minutes away because that's who they had the contract with. And I'm like, that's odd. And of course, nowadays, that's pretty commonplace. Maybe you're not driving 45 minutes, but you're going somewhere where they tell you to go. Mm-hmm. But as far as, just in general, medicine back then, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have all these things. So pretty much when you saw a patient, you said, this is what I think you should do. This is the best thing for you. They went along with it. Now, I think in some regards, it's better. You have sort of this shared decision-making, as they call it, and it is interesting because, when I would see spine patients, you could go, okay, there's like 4 or 5 different avenues you can do. And this is sort of the way I think you should go, and then sometimes it's maybe an information overload for the patient. They're like, well, I don't know what to do. What do you think I should do? And other people are like, okay, well, I'm going to go this way. So the other thing is, when I was in practice, most of your practices were private, at least orthopedics. Of course, as you know, that's all changing. People are becoming employed physicians, which is, good and bad. I mean, it frees you up from the administrative stuff, but then, you're working for the man. I mean, that's the downside. You do lose some autonomy. From the record standpoint, I remember, I forget where I was. I was, probably halfway through my career when the electronic health record thing came into being. And I remember these guys would come to the office like, oh, it's going to make you more efficient. I'm like, how? I can't see any more people that I do. I'm totally jammed up, and now not only that, now I got to pay somebody to put all this stuff in the computer or spend, 2 hours after work on my own. So it didn't really make me any more efficient. It cost me more money. I mean, I will say it certainly makes it easier for people to access a person's record. I mean, if somebody calls me and I'm on call at home, I can get on the computer, figure out what's going on versus trying to guess or have to go into the office. So from that perspective, it's good, but it certainly didn't save me any time and it didn't save me any money. The other thing is that, back then it was fee for service. You did your surgery, you saw the patient, you got paid, whatever. And of course, as you well know, that's all being chopped away. Now you have all these metrics that you need to meet depending on what you do. You've got peer review that you have to do because somebody doesn't really think that this person needs surgery, even though you said they did. And if you're lucky, the guy on the other end of the phone might actually do what you do for a living, or they could be a pulmonologist or a cardiologist. Nothing that there's wrong with that. Those aren't bad people, but I just don't think that they are the people that should be determining whether or not this guy gets his, shoulder scope for his labral tear. So that's kind of how it's evolved for me, just the way that the whole dynamic is changing. Mm-hmm. I mean, medicine is still a great career, don't get me wrong. And I think people coming out today, don't know the way it was. So yep. This is the new normal. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And I would say, I mean, probably even not my age group, but the age group a little bit older than me, between us, I would say they're probably the ones that lose out the most because they've seen, I mean, you guys were making money hand over fist, right? Mm-hmm. Like you guys were making good money. And so I want to bring this study up because I think it's interesting. A couple of points I'll bring up that have to do with medicine, probably in a negative light, but it's factual. So let's just talk about it. The study I've seen recently, you've probably seen it before anyways. It's in the Journal of Arthroplasty, but this is all of medicine. But basically, they compared orthopedic surgeons to lawyers, engineers, and economists, all high-level professionals. And basically what they found is orthopedic surgeons over the last 20 years, when you bring in inflation, have actually lost 40% of their income. And then when you compare that to lawyers, engineers, economists, they all grew 30% compared to inflation. So they went up with inflation and then some. We actually went down with inflation by 40% in the last 20 years. That's crazy. And it's like, 2% a year doesn't feel like a lot until you're 5-10 years down the road and you're like, holy cow, I got to do more surgeries. I got to see more patients to keep up with what I was doing before.
Well, and I think that's a good lesson on a financial side as to why you can't go crazy when you start making all this money. Because I saw many physicians that were maybe a little bit older than me were in that where we were making, good money for what we did. And I think their mindset was, I'm just going to spend all my money now because I know I'm going to make it up later.
Mm-hmm.
And then before you know it, later, they're not making it up. There's less of it.
Yeah.
And so when they thought maybe they could just ramp up and have all this money to fund their retirement and do all these things, they didn't. And so the next thing you know, they're working until they're 70, 75, and then they're grumpy old doctors because they hate what they're doing, but they're doing it because they have to.
Yep.
My thing was, for me, as I said earlier, I wanted to slow down and I enjoyed slowing down. But the problem is, when I first started practice, my overhead was maybe 30%. When I retired, I don't remember the exact number, but it was probably 45, 48%, which is probably about the industry standard for, I think, an orthopedic surgeon office right now. And of course, if you slow down, you're generating less income. So say, you're generating $15 at 48%, but now you're only generating 10. So now you're paying that much more overhead, and then you're paying tax on the money you do get. And the next thing you know, you're making 5 cents on the dollar. Mm-hmm. And it's like, is it really worth continuing to do this? I mean, I enjoyed it, and I didn't want to stop. And the other thing is, you just get tired of all the, as one doctor I know said, he called it the machinery of medicine. You just get tired of all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Because we were in private practice, we weren't employed. So you're dealing with meetings and this and that, and you're like, man, I just had an 8 to 5 day, and now we're going to have a meeting at 5:30. This is probably going to go till 8:30. No, thank you. So I just hung it up, and I was happy.
Quick interruption. Legacy RX Conference 2026 is coming to Indianapolis October 16th through the 18th. Limited spots are available. Build wealth. Live free. Leave what lasts. Grab your ticket at legacyrx.co. Now back to the episode. Yeah, that's a good point you bring up because, people that are employed are like, oh man, I wish I was private. And then people that are private are like, it'd be nice just to be employed. It's a simpler lifestyle. Yeah. The pros and cons to both. And,
absolutely.
The point you brought up earlier is we do make a good living. Being a physician is it's a calling for sure. We help people. We have we're respected in the community. There's a lot of great things that go with it. But it's almost like we're too altruistic where we just want to help people and we just keep our head down. And then all of a sudden the insurance companies and Medicare and all these things like kind of take advantage of us a little bit. Like we'll just slowly drip the reimbursement down each year. So with that being said, I think that docs need to be smarter about their finances. You brought that up. Be smarter about that. That's what we try to talk about on the podcast is, building wealth, trying to think like the wealthy, just have a different mindset when it comes to all that. Let's talk about that with you. Do you mind getting into, how you invested and what you did throughout the years?
No, I'm happy to talk about it. I think, people need to hear it. I mean, just how I did. This is not, my disclaimer, this is not investment advice. It's like the guy, the guy that's going to get you out of your timeshare. I'm not an attorney. I may sound like one, but I'm not one. I may sound like an investment advisor, but I am not. So get that out there. But I'll just go into it. So when I first got into practice, I think one of the things that really helped me was being in the military. And for two reasons. One, I had a set income. I could work hard. I could work less. I got the same regardless. But, we worked really hard because that's what you did in your residency. So that was sort of your mindset. You were just sort of a go-getter, even though I remember once one of the ships was coming into port when we were in Okinawa, guy had something going on. He goes, "Hey, can you see him?" I said, "Oh yeah, no problem." So I tell my girl, said, "Hey, the ship's coming in, probably won't be here till 5. Can we just add this guy on?" Then I figured then I'll get home, right? She goes, "Well, you can do that. There's only one problem." I'm like, "What's that?" She goes, "We all go home at 3:30. So, okay, that's not going to happen. But anyway, so having that sort of fixed income, which was probably, maybe 70% less than what I would have made in private practice. So already I'm learning to live on 70% less than what I would be making when I'm out in private practice. The other thing was, because I was in the military, I couldn't do sort of a 401k because I was in the military and they have a retirement for you. So I said, well, gee, I'd like to kind of have my own thing. And what I started doing was investing in, back then it was mutual funds, on my own, just doing some basic research. Again, the internet might have just been getting started. I can't really remember. I think it was maybe a little bit. So just doing some basic research on things and trying to invest in funds that I thought would be maybe a little bit aggressive because there wasn't money that I needed. The other thing I did was, as soon as my children were born, I started investing into a fund for presumably college. I mean, if they decided to go to trade school or something, okay, we could use it for that. But I put that money in there. And of course, I think you've spoken about it many times, the beauty of compounding. So, lo and behold, now that I'm retired, the investing that I did on my own actually has more value than the 401k that I did when I was in private practice. Not only that, but when my kids went to college, I didn't have to take a penny out of my pocket to pay for it because I had all that money. And then actually, because they went to state schools, all but one of them, there was money left over. And guess what I did? I gave it to them. Here's what's left over from your college fund. Do with it what you want. So, and I think too, back then, we were doctors, we weren't business people. So, and information was harder to get. Like I said, maybe the internet was just getting going. I don't remember exactly. And so, information wasn't readily available at your fingertips. And, investing in real estate, never heard of it. That wasn't even on the radar. Some of these things that you talk about, those weren't even on the radar. Those are things that I've gotten into later as alternative investments, so that there's passive income. So, and that's kind of how I did it. I didn't have a lot of flashy toys. Didn't drive a 911. My wife and I, at one time, I remember we were looking at a Porsche. I'm like, gosh, that's kind of a cool car. It's black, it's shiny, probably goes fast. I'd look pretty cool going down the street in that.
Your hair would be blowing in the wind, right?
Exactly. What little I have, yeah. And, what do? We settled on like 2 Mazda 3s or something. It was just ridiculous. But the insurance was less. They didn't run on high tests. They ran forever. In fact, as you know, I'm still driving Andrea, your wife's Mazda 3 that we bought her when she turned 16, 2011 Mazda 3. I still drive that car. I do have a Porsche,
which is awesome.
But that's only when it's nice out.
Yeah, exactly. You got it in there somewhere, right? But
yeah, I did finally. I've had that thing about 2 or 3 years. That's it. So I didn't buy my Porsche until I retired.
Yeah, that was your first one. And it's very practical, right? To do that, to do those things. And I feel the same way, for me, it's like, this is a depreciating asset. It's going to, or not depreciating liability, really.
Right.
And so give me from point A to point B.
I think the problem is, younger physicians, they want a boat, they want a vacation home, they want this, they want that. Then you become a slave to all these things that you buy that you probably hardly ever use.
Right. Yep.
I don't think people really appreciate even a boat, for instance. I mean, we had my in-laws, we bought the boat from them. It was like a 22-foot Sea Ray, used. It wasn't much. But, you buy some fancy new wake surfing boat today that's going to run you $250, sucks down a lot of gas, and you got to pay insurance on it and maybe a dockage fee, all adds up.
No, you're exactly right. The Bible talks about being a slave to the lender, and has, something to do with student loans, but a lot of doctors get themselves into trouble. Yeah, they have the student loans, but they go buy the big house, buy the car, buy the fancy things. And now they're a slave to that purchase. And that's hard to get out of. And to your point, like you can only work so much to get out of that. So real quick, a couple things on that. Did you set aside a certain percentage of your revenue per month or whatever to invest? Did you calculate that out?
Yeah, I think I kind of took a look at, how much did we want to spend, your expenses, and then a certain amount to invest. But I mean, I think the certain amount to invest wasn't sort of like an afterthought, whereas it's like, okay, well, we're going to spend all this money and I'll have a couple cents left over to invest. No, It was something that was planned. Like the plan is to invest this much.
Yep.
If we maybe have to forego something to do it, that's okay. But we still took nice vacations and we still had fun. I would say we were frugal. We weren't cheap. The kids all talk about vacations that we took, and they all loved them, and they all got a car when they were 16. And, I mean, it wasn't a Porsche. It was something practical. We had an old Ford Expedition, Eddie Bauer edition, I remember. It probably had about 100,000 miles on it. And every kid, before they got their car, had to drive that Expedition. Because, like, if you can drive this clunker, you can drive anything, and then you'll get your car. So that's just great. Weird things that we did, Yeah,
a little test. But I mean, to your point though, I mean, the kids talk about the vacations you guys went on all the time. They talk about, the experiences, and they only grow as they get older, right?
Right.
You remember them more fondly as you get older, which is awesome. So that's the way to do it. Instead of giving them stuff, you did some of that, but you were more on the experiences, which, I have a lot of respect for, because that's something that we think about now, but you guys were doing that, when they were young.
Yeah, and they do remember that. I mean, you can buy them all the trinkets and toys, and then they're going to just want more, and they're like, oh, hey, Dad, how you doing? You got two more? You got another toy for me? That's not how it works,
Yep, more handouts.
Yep,
that's great. And then the other thing I was going to bring up too is, young physicians now, you feel bad for them when they come out of training now with interest rates being high. Student rate loans are really high. Student loans have continued to go up every year. Their reimbursements low. All these things, they're coming out very different than the way you guys came out 35 years ago, right? Even me coming out, 9-10 years ago, I feel like right now is a tough time for young physicians. I guess what's some good advice you would have for a young physician coming out when talking about finances and student loans and all that stuff? Just kind of feeling, behind a little bit.
Well, I'm probably a little bit out of the loop on that stuff, but sure. I do think, because so many people are becoming employed, there's probably some avenue where the employer perhaps can figure some mechanism out where they will assist you in paying down your debt. And I think what you referenced earlier, okay, do you really have to buy a house in the nicest neighborhood in town when you first get out into practice, when you've got bills to pay? Maybe after you've paid all your bills and you know what your income is going to be, maybe then you can upgrade. I mean, where we live now, we didn't buy this place. I mean, we've been here, say 20 years now that we built it. So that would have been what, 13 years or so, actually more than I've been in practice.
10 to 12 years in practice or so. Yeah.
I was in practice for a while, and I didn't have any debt when I came out.
Yep.
Military paid for everything. I had zero debt.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in better shape than a lot of people.
Yep. And
so I think just see what mechanisms you have where somebody can help pay down that debt and just live within your means. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So from everything you know now financially, like all your investments over the years, things like that, now you're retired. If you were in my shoes, is there anything that you would have done different when you were, 40, 41, middle of your career? Anything investing wise or financially you would have done different?
Well, I think I would have probably tried to diversify a little bit more, maybe into real estate, but those were things I just had no knowledge of. So to get into things that I didn't know much about. And I actually will tell you that, I got burned on a deal once. I mean, a bunch of people did, unfortunately, where somebody of all things who used to teach finances at a church, he wasn't a church employee, but he was a church member, taught finances, said he had this really good deal down in Florida, going to get these condos at a good deal because he had a bunch of investors. And wow, that sounds nice. You trust the guy, you think he's going to do you right. Did I even bother to check this out? Nope. Just sounded good. Some friends of ours were doing it too. I think, well, okay. And it turned out to be just a big old scam where he was, we got condos, but we didn't get him for a good deal. He got him for a good deal and sold him out to us at a markup. But, we did get some restitution through the whole deal. I mean, had to get attorneys involved and everything else. It was a bit messy. I wouldn't say we were made whole, but it was a good learning experience. Yep. And, as you know, there's deals out there that you think are perfectly vetted that can still go south. So I think, with what you present through your Legacy RX and those types of things, those are the kind of bits of information and opportunities and conferences that people need to go to if they really want to go full force into these other alternatives to really understand what's going on. And, some of the deals I've done, the people, I know the people, they're great people. And you know what? The deals have been fantastic. Zero complaints. So I think when you're with the right people, you're going to get a good result.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. You got to know and trust and truly trust them. And to what you're talking about with like real estate and alternative investments, that could be a piece, shouldn't be your whole thing, right? Like, I used to think docs need to hit home runs, have a windfall of cash, early on in my career. And the more I learn about this stuff, the more it's like, no, just hit singles and doubles consistently. Let that compound interest do its thing. And you'll retire with a lot of money.
Yeah, I would agree because, if you're trying to hit home runs, you're going to probably strike out more often than not. Mm-hmm. You may hit the occasional home run. I mean, I've made some lucky stock picks. Frankly, it was pure luck. And probably the only mistake I did was not buying a lot of it, but then I was always very conservative. And I think, not to digress, but some of that conservatism comes from, I had spent a lot of time with a different uncle who was sort of related to the one that was the surgeon. And more and more, my great uncle from Italy, spoke Italian. He grew up in the Depression. So he was very conservative. Everything he bought, he paid cash.
Nice.
If he didn't have the money, like my aunt wanted a new Cadillac, cash. No credit card, no loan, cash. Yep. That's how he did it. So, I wasn't quite that conservative, but I mean, it certainly rubbed off on me somewhat not to sort of get out there and speculate. And I think, with the people that are out there today, and you can just really vet people, get to know people, see their track record, that's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then, real quick, this is something that I've always wondered myself, just, for me in the future, and anybody listening probably thinks the same thing. Is there a certain number that you think about, like a certain net worth or number invested that you feel like, okay, this is my retirement number? Did that ever come across for you or any of your colleagues?
Well, I think kind of what I look at is what do I spend in a year?
Mm-hmm.
What do I want to spend? I mean, maybe, okay, I'm retired, so we want to take some vacations. And this is where you work with a financial professional to figure all this stuff out. And then you figure out, okay, well, if I draw down on my investments a certain amount every year, how will that look over time? And you just have to crunch the numbers. I mean, if you want to really live it up and you want to take expensive vacations and maybe you want to have a yacht and a jet, you're going to need a lot of money. If you don't need those things, if you want to take nice vacations, but you don't want to really have a yacht and you don't want to have a jet, you don't need nearly as much money. Mm-hmm. And it's really based upon, I think, the lifestyle that you want to live. And, for me, if I died today, I know that my wife has more than enough money to get by for the rest of her life and probably have plenty of left over for all the kids.
Yeah, which is great, right? That gives you peace of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to worry about it. And you're just comfortable where you're at.
Yeah. No, that's great. Anything else you want to touch on when it comes to, financial investing, anything like that before we move on to the next more important sections?
No, I think, from my piece, I mean, that's just how I did it. I think slow and steady wins the race. That's key. And, get with people that know a lot more about it than you do. I think that's key.
Yeah. I think that's good advice. We've all, tried DIY and, a lot of people do. I think it's like 60% of people have a financial advisor. And I think the biggest advice I tell people is have a financial advisor, have somebody in your corner who knows what they're doing, who studies this stuff all the time, but also you need to have financial IQ so you can, talk to them and bring them ideas and, and make sure that they're doing what's best thing on your behalf. Right.
Yeah. You can't be totally ignorant. Yeah. You have to have some baseline knowledge. And, frankly, had I taken an hour to do a little research on that one deal I was telling you about that went south, I probably would have never done that deal. I would have discovered some things and said, no, thanks. And probably warned a lot of other people not to get into it either. But I didn't. I was too trusting.
Yeah. Yep. Which a lot of docs are, right? I mean, we didn't get the financial education and we just want to trust everybody. And I think, from the outside, doctors are easy targets to a degree because, anybody can do a background check on us. Like you just go look, hey, he's working for the local hospital. He's already gone through all the background checks and a lot of people in the community trust him. He's got 5 out of 5 stars. And so they know that you're trustworthy. Doesn't mean they're trustworthy.
Right. Right. And they know you got money.
They know you got money. That's right.
So,
yep. All right. So, I think I told you the story the other day, but I remember this from residency and it came up again in my mind, a couple of months ago and we're going to move on to the next section, but I just want to bring this up. I remember when I was dating your daughter, Andrea, in residency, I went out, it was, last day of rotation with one attending, great guy, great surgeon. He obviously, maybe didn't have a good relationship with his wife because he was trying to talk me out of, doing the engagement, getting married, that whole thing. And I just remember I was coming to your house that night and I come over and we were just talking about it. And I said, the exact thing he was telling me, not to throw him under the bus, but you actually brought a couple Bible verses and pointed them out to me that were very much pro-marriage, very positive, but very biblical. And I respected that. I thought that was awesome. It was like the exact opposite of the conversation I literally had, an hour before. And I just had a lot of respect for that. It just opened my eyes. So, when you were going through medicine and everything you were doing, how did your Christian faith, how did that shine through when you were going through everything?
Well, I think that a couple things, I know you talk about, having favorite verses and things. And I think, even though this isn't a religious podcast, I think it's important. And anything, frankly, in Proverbs is good advice. For anybody, even if you're not a Christian, read the book of Proverbs. That's great advice. The other thing is sort of like my favorite verse. I have many, but from a work perspective, it's Colossians 3:22. It's like, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. So basically what that means is whatever you're going to do, be it your job, your family, maybe some volunteer work, you're going to be fully engaged, fully committed to doing that work. And for me, what's my motivation to do that? My motivation is to bring glory and honor to God by what I do, since I'm a Christian. That's how I show people that I'm a Christian, by doing good work. I'm not in it to get, approval or praise or accolades from people. That's not why I do it. If I get those things, hey, that's a perk. That's not why I do it. And I think, you can't do things to get praise from people or accolades. Look at pro athletes. They get them until they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then people are trying to get them off the team, get them canned because they hate them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's not what you should be focusing on.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And yeah, I just feel like, with your patients and your staff, that always, it was very obvious, that you were, God-fearing. And so I know that patients loved it. I know your staff loved it. And you're a mentor to me. So obviously I love it and I appreciate it. And then that helps me raise my kids, me and Andrea raising our kids, knowing God. And so that's important.
Yeah. And not to interrupt you, but
please.
You have to have a moral compass. I just finished reading a book by Dennis Prager. It's, If There Is No God. And it's just like, he talks about, okay, society wants to determine what's right and what's wrong. Well, that can change. If man makes the rules can change. And the Bible doesn't change. The Bible has the rules. They don't change. They're the way, 1,000 years ago as they are today. And I think that's got to be your moral compass. And, when you talk about the hospital situation, one of the things I think I liked was they would always put the nursing students or the scrub tech students in our room, because they knew there wasn't going to be shouting. There wasn't going to be profanity. We didn't yell and scream at people if they got something wrong. We helped them along. Linda, who worked with me for 20 plus years, I called it our little office ministry. You'd see people. I'm like, look, yeah, you have back issues, but that's not your issue. Who's taking care of you? And then you find out the 80-year-old lady has her 60-year-old son living with her who doesn't work, who plays video games all day and drinks beer. And I'm like, well, A, kick him out of the house, or B, make him get a job. You can't live like this. And then I'd have Linda come pray with him. So, that's just what you did.
Yeah.
And I think people appreciated it.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I would tell you now, for me, I talk to patients more now about, the Bible, God, Christianity, more now than ever in the last couple of years. Maybe it's because I finally actually read the Bible myself, but I think it's a lot of people are aware. A lot of people are needing that more now than ever, right? They need somewhere to go and somebody to trust and talk about that. And, to your point, like that is the foundation. That's where you can always go to find the truth. Yeah,
I think, certainly as a society, we've gotten away from that. When you think about some of these Ivy League schools, they were religious organizations that's founded on, and now they're jettisoning all that to be secular. And, it's just not a good way to be. And I think, we tried to present rather a Christian attitude in our office. I know many of my partners were Christians, and I think, you don't have to go out there and just push it down people's throats. I think by the way you act, by the way you speak, by the way you think, people figure out that there's something different about you, and they want to know what that is.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
Yeah.
And what?
Then you tell them.
Yeah.
Here's why I am the way I am.
Yep. That's a really good point. Yeah, I like that a lot. You guys had a culture, you and your partners had a culture that, patients wanted to be around. So they felt it, whether you
Yeah.
told them or not. Yep. No, I love
Yeah.
that.
The other thing too is I think in medicine, we're so focused on curing, but you have to care for people.
Yep.
It's caring, not just curing. You can't,
Yeah.
you gotta look at the big picture. I mean, I used to tell patients, I've done a lot of these operations. I'm very comfortable doing it. You've never had this operation. I know it's uncomfortable for you and you're scared. And I get that, but we'll get you through it, and I think for me, I've had some surgery, vocal cord and other things done. And I wish I'd had those done a long time ago, because probably would have given me a better perspective on sort of like the patient side of things, being just versus being the provider.
More empathetic. Yeah.
Yeah, because you get it. I mean, even though it's my world, when you go into the hospital, yeah, I got an IV in my arm and I'm in the gown, but it's still my world. Comfortable in that world, but it's still different because, I'm the guy getting cut out. I'm not the guy doing the cutting. So it's a little bit different. Yeah.
Yep. Another thing that you just reminded me is, now, we have quick interactions with patients, and I think it's only going to get quicker and quicker, like shorter office visits, because you got to see more and more patients. I still love the social history aspect, right? Getting to know your patients on a personal level, remembering their stories, getting, deep with them and understanding their own personal situation. They love that conversation as much as anything else. You can almost go in there and pretty much know what's going on with that patient, physical exam, little history. And you can get to that answer pretty quick, but then the conversation about their social history is what really, attracts them to you and gives that trust between you and the patient. And so I hope that more docs continue to do that, because I think your generation did a great job with that. I know that it's becoming more of an assembly line, generally speaking. And I just hope that docs can hold on to that good relationship with the patient.
And I think that's part of the caring piece, like you said, it's the caring piece. And I think the other thing too is I think there's a tendency to just say, okay, you need XYZ, here's your slip, see ya, come back when it's done. And, I would have people that would come a fair distance to see me. And I'd say, hey, you know what, you need an MRI or you need this test. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to set the test up to be done at this time in this location in town. And then you're going to see me 2 hours later after the test is done. And so it would save them a trip in. Navy, Fletch.
Hey, come in a little bit.
Avester. Are you going to get in the podcast? You're going to ask me some questions?
Anyway, finish that thought. Sorry about that.
No, that was pretty much it. You want me to repeat it?
No, you don't have to.
No.
That was good. But finishing up, a couple of things real quick. So what is the best advice you have for a physician now who's going through all this stuff, who's dealing with, everything going on in medicine? You just retired a few years back. Like, what's your best advice for people going through it now in all specialties? What do you got? Yeah,
I think the advice is care for your patients. Don't just worry about curing them. If you care for them, you will cure them. Make sure, you allot time for your family. Don't become a slave to an income. And, I get it. You got referrals, but even that sort of, I think, is changing in the employed physician model versus, the private practice model. So make sure that you carve out the time for your wife and your family. And when you do carve that time out, make sure you're there engaged with them, not, hanging out with your buddies, hitting golf balls, or, watching whatever on TV while the kids run around and wonder why you're not hanging out with them. And live within your means. I mean, don't become a slave to, don't be house poor, be boat poor, whatever poor. The money will come. If you work hard and you do a good job, the money will come. Don't spend it all at once. Be frugal. You don't have to be cheap, but be frugal and be smart. And then get with people that are good at investing, learn from them, use their resources and maybe their connections, if you will, to be exposed to alternative forms of investment. In my case, it's real estate, multifamily, and then you'll have passive income. But again, you got to have money to invest or some, nest egg that you can cover. Like maybe you're going to borrow the money to invest, like which I've done, which to me was completely foreign, borrowing money to invest, but actually it works because I'm getting more money from my investment than it's costing me to borrow the money.
Yeah. And what are you borrowing from?
My investments.
Yeah.
So it's like a line of credit.
Yeah.
So my investments are still there. They're still generating income, appreciating depending on the market. But I'm not investing in something speculative that could go south. I'm investing in solid investments that are going to give almost a guaranteed return of a certain amount over time. And I think that's the trick.
Yeah. No, that's great.
The next widget, you know what I mean? I'm not doing that.
Yep, exactly. No, that's great. And so very good advice. I think anybody listening will get a lot out of that. It's simple, but it's a matter of doing it, right? Executing.
Yeah. I'm just not a flashy guy,
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
I do things slow and steady wins a race.
Yeah. So, all right, last 4 questions. I'm going to do a 5th one for you, but
Sure.
What book are you reading right now, or what book has shaped you the most in your life? Whichever one you want to answer.
Well, the book I just finished, which was If There Is No God, is a great book. The Bible is a great book. I've read that going on twice now. Now it takes me longer because as I go through the chapters, I do a commentary as well with it. So that takes a lot longer to read a commentary and there's just so much information there. But every time you go through it, you just learn more things. The next book I'm going to start reading is called Wealth Surge. I don't have it yet. It's on the way. So those would be, the Bible, If There Is No God, Dennis Prager, and Wealth Surge is the newest one that I'm going to be reading.
Yep. Yeah. Let me know how that one is, because I'm in the middle of it right now and I'm loving it.
Okay. Yeah.
It's good. All right. What advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
25-year-old self as an orthopedic surgeon will say, I would say, first off, when you're starting out, do simple cases. Don't bite off more than you can chew. If you have a case that maybe is in a little bit more than you feel comfortable with, and you're where you have people that that you trust, see if they'll take the case and maybe you can scrub in it with them so you can, get some experience. The other thing is don't let patients talk you into doing things you don't feel comfortable. Sometimes you'll say, well, you got a pretty bad wrist fracture. I think you ought to see the hand surgeon. He's 3 minutes away. Oh, no, doc, I know you can do it. You go ahead and fix it up for me. Yeah, but if it doesn't turn out, it's not going to be the story. So don't be talked into doing things that you don't feel comfortable doing, okay? And, make sure you cut that time out in your schedule for family. Make sure that you don't go crazy spending money you don't really have. Invest early, let compounding work for you. And, it's slow. Like you said, singles and doubles. That's all you need to do. You do that for 33 years, guess what? You retire early.
Yep.
Because I retired when I was, 64, I think.
That's great.
64 or 63, I can't remember. One of those two.
Yep, I love that. All right, what is your personal definition of wealth?
I think my definition of wealth at this point is time, having time to do the things that I want to do. And of course, having enough money saved up that I can do that, or at least enough money coming in that I can do those things. Because, I've got, we got 10 grandkids. I'm sure more over time. I love hanging out with the grandkids. I love doing things with them. And, that's the thing, when you're raising your own kids, there's like no book, right? You're just doing it. You're winging it.
Yeah.
So then after you've made all these mistakes, you're like, okay, well, now I got grandkids, so I can do it differently. I can do it better. And then when they're with you, you can kind of raise them And, when they go back to their parents, parents can raise them the way they want to. Just as an aside, I used to take, the one son-in-law, brother-in-law played hockey, and I would take the kids into the family lounge at the rink, and, the other wives and would be there. I'm like, hey, this is like Vegas. What happens in the family lounge stays in the family lounge. The kids get a cookie or a cake pop, doesn't go anywhere. That was our secret.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't tell Gigi, don't tell your parents.
That's right. That was Pappy. That's me spoiling the grandkids.
That's great.
But it's fun. They remember that.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. The kids love it. All right. I love that as well. Okay. Proverbs 11:25 states, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. If you could make one lasting impact by giving back, what would it be?
Well, I think what you just said is huge. Giving back in any way you can, be it financially. I was tutoring third and fifth graders in reading and math for a while till the program lost their sort of like, they had to have a teacher in charge. Not that it's hard to tutor third and fifth graders in reading and math, but that was the rules. Enjoyed that because, you had the same kid for the whole year. So you really got to know them, you'd see them improve. That was great, and you're doing it for free. You're not getting anything in return. I think, my uncle always used to say, do things for people that they can't pay you back, because then, you've really done something good for somebody. So if you can help people out financially, do so. With time, do so. Even advice, people would call, hey, I get this problem, I get that, people say, oh, don't you get tired? It's like, no, I'm a retired doctor, but I still enjoy talking to people. And if I can help them out or at least get them going in the right direction with their medical problem, why not?
Yeah, you can give back financially, but it's so much more impactful when you can give back with your time and your knowledge, your wisdom.
Yep.
So, all right, here's a question I'm adding for you. What is one lesson that you hope your grandchildren learn from your life?
Well, from my life, wow. Well, I would say that I love them all, that I want the best for them, that I'll do anything for them, within reason, and that I was there for them when they needed me.
Love it. Great way to end it. Yeah, I appreciate this. I appreciate you coming on. We're writing this book, Legacy RX, and we'll be putting your pearls in there throughout the book. So, we want it to be a book that is very different than anything else on the market, anything else that physicians have written about, finance. It's going to be so much more than that. And just to have your insight, just like we got today, will, I think, set it apart from any other book that's out there. So we appreciate it. And, one thing I told Andrea this early on, and I make this quote all the time where it's like, I tell dads, your son will follow your example. Your daughter will marry it. And I tell Andrea, I'm like, I hope that you married your dad's example because, that's who I aspire to be. He's
Yeah,
so I appreciate everything you've done for me and our family.
No, that's my pleasure. That's what I'm here for. That's why God put me on the earth.
Yep. We appreciate you. All right. This is going to be a wrap. And I think a lot of people will get a lot of information from this. I think a lot of docs are, just trying to figure out where to navigate and what to do right now. And so, getting the wisdom from you who's seen it from the other side is awesome.
Yeah. And I think, just don't, people kind of get their hair on fire. It's like, it's just a slow process. If you just let the process work, time, finances, treating people well, it'll all work out in the end and you'll be successful and you'll be happy. But as you know, there's too many people that money burns a hole in their pocket and they're grumpy old doctors at 70 and they hate doing it, but they have to.
Yep, exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Kyle.
This is my time. I'm on the rise. Can't hold me down. I'm too fly. This is my time.
Thanks for listening to the Doctors Investor Club podcast. I hope today's conversation inspired you to think bigger, dream bolder, and take the next step toward financial freedom. If you're a doctor or dentist and you're ready to join our community, head over to doctorsinvestorclub.com. There you'll find our free mobile app and private forum. built exclusively for physicians and dentists, featuring AI tools, curated investor resources, and live event access. And to learn more about Legacy RX, our upcoming conference, the book, and the mission to help physicians build wealth, live free, and leave what lasts, visit legacyrx.co. Subscribe to the show, share it with a colleague, and remember, you're not just building wealth, you're building legacy.
This is my time. Can't hold me down, I'm too fly. This is my time. Ready to shine.